Okay, these are iron-rich microspheres, and the main article that I'm trying to present here deals with them. The U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, found them as well. So they found them, but nobody really knew what they were. The thing about them is that they're formed as a result of surface tension, and what's important is that the temperatures of the fires could not possibly have reached the temperature that was necessary in order to melt the iron to be able to expel them into the air, for them to form little BBs and form these iron-rich microspheres that were found in the World Trade Center dust. So examples of surface tension, you can just see how that phenomenon contributes to forming bubbles, whether it be through water spraying outward or molten iron shooting through the air. Okay, the WTC-7 was interesting because they had sulfidation of the structural steel. It had looked like Swiss cheese. It was attacked by what was called a liquid eutectic mixture containing primarily iron, oxygen, and sulfur. And interestingly enough, they never solved what it was, and they never even addressed it when they went on to the analysis of, WTC 1 and 2. They just forgot about this. NIST never even addressed it. Okay, so, oh, and by the way, that's an indication of probably the thermate was used, and I'll get into that in a minute. Here we have bilayered red-gray chips, which were the subject of the analysis of the paper, the main paper, which I'm going to get to in just a second, which was recently published. And the red-gray chips have on them as a binder, and on the other side they have nano-sized aluminum and nano-sized iron oxide, which is basically called super thermite, okay, or nano-thermite. And them being so small and intimately mixed creates a high-temperature reaction that is more explosive and more dangerous than regular thermite. So it would be effective in this regard to use it as an explosive to be able to bring down the buildings. These are examples of thermite. You can see how energetic they are, how much heat is produced, how it corrodes that was originally some kind of container. And this right here is the vehicle where they place it on top and burn right through the engine.
What's the difference between thermite and thermite?
I'm going to get to it right in just a second. So you can actually see it on the screen. This is a paper, active thermitic material discovered in dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center catastrophe. Dr. Stephen Jones is the main scientist who's really researching this. Dr. Niels Harrod is also researching it, but he's kind of new to the scene. He studies nanochemistry. And I've never even heard of Dr. Jeffrey Ferrer, but he's the second scientist on the list. I guess he made a major contribution to this particular paper. And above it you see all the different 9/11 truth activists and also people that have contributed to this paper as well, but they're not like the first and second and third scientists. Okay, so thermite and thermate, the only difference between them is thermite is aluminum reacted with iron oxide at a very, very high temperature. It just doesn't react on its own. And it produces molten iron because of the high heat, and it produces aluminum oxide, but the aluminum oxide is vaporized because of the high temperature. The only difference between thermite and thermate is that you add sulfur to remember what I mentioned earlier about the corroded steel. You add sulfur to the mix, and what it does is it lowers the melting point of steel so that it's easily cut through, like a hot knife through butter, as they say. So it's an aluminothermic reaction that we're talking about here. Okay, solid geochemistry, which is the thing that creates, nanothermite, is basically a process where, in this case, they use iron chloride. They mix it with propylene oxide, which is a proton scavenger. And if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make perfect sense to me either. Okay, and you form nano-iron oxide, which means that at the nanometer level, all the particles are really, really small. And so before it gels, which is forming like a polymer matrix, you throw in nano-aluminum, which is formed by some process, and I don't know how it's done. And in the end, you end up with an energetic nanocomposite, which is nanothermite. Okay, so the bottom line is Al-Qaeda couldn't possibly come up with this, and just stuck it in those buildings. Okay. So active thermetic material discovered in the dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center catastrophe. What's that main paper about? That they found red material which contains grains of approximately 100 nanometers across, which are largely iron oxide. They found aluminum as elemental aluminum. They found that the iron oxide and the aluminum are intimately mixed in the red material. When ignited, the thermite reacts at 430 degrees Celsius, which is far below the ignition temperature of regular thermite, so it implies strongly that it's man-made. How to get there. Numerous iron-rich spherules, which is what I mentioned before, created by molten iron, expelled into the air, and actually in huge amounts. And of course, forming little BBs as a result of surface tension. That's found in the World Trade Center dust. The red portion of these chips is found to be unreacted thermitic material, and it's highly energetic. The last thing that I would like to say is that these compositions of aluminum and iron oxide and whatnot are found in regular paint. So if you created a super thermite and just had it as a paint mixture, it's not toxic, it's not going to react on its own, and you could use tons and tons of it and distribute it wherever you wanted inside the World Trade Center building at the last minute whenever they wanted to do this, and you wouldn't even know. And that's that.